Monrovia, the seaside capital of Liberia. Amid the sunshine and coastal waters is a country in transition, 7 years after a peace agreement ended 14 years of civil war. Walls riddled by bullets and burned-out buildings still dominate parts of the city skyline. Idle young men pass their days in quiet frustration, many of them ex-combatants. Still, for those who stayed here during the violence or returned after peace was reached, today's Liberia has come a long way from those early post-conflict days. This year's coming presidential elections will serve as a true test of Liberia's commitment to peace, as well as the United Nations' ability to shepherd such a process through to success. Ellen Loy heads the United Nations peacekeeping mission in Liberia, which has kept the peace while the country rebuilds.
When I came here in 2006, it was really striking how everything was destroyed by the Civil War. Electricity, water, roads, everything. If you think that what you see today is a country where there's a lot has to be done, I just tell you 4 years ago, we didn't have Tubman Boulevard with 4 lanes. We didn't have traffic jam. We had bumpy roads and so on.
Liberia, for all of its progress, remains largely defined by the civil war that ravaged it for 14 years. This small West African country of 3.5 million people was once infamous for child soldiers, blood diamonds, and Charles Taylor, the country's former president, now on trial for crimes against humanity in neighboring Sierra Leone. Liberia, however, is turning a corner, and it may eventually serve as a model for how to build a sustained peace and prevent future atrocities. The first post-war elections in 2005 resulted in Africa's first female president, Ellen Johnson-Sirleaf, a Harvard-educated Liberian and former World Bank and UN official. Nicknamed the Iron Lady, she's known for a no-nonsense demeanor in tackling the country's main challenges. Sirleaf is seeking a second term in elections set for October.
The next election will be the defining event for Liberia's move toward normalcy and move toward sustainable peace. It will be the second election after war. You might say the first one was still going through a transition. But that second election, which we all must do all we can to make sure is free, it's fair, it represents the people's choice, and that is accepted by all. The results are accepted by all. After that, I think Liberia will be put on an irreversible course for democracy, development, peace.
Today, Liberia still lacks an electrical grid, leaving residents and businesses to rely on gas-powered generators. It has less than 500 miles of paved roads. The pockmarked dirt paths that lead into the countryside serve only to suppress economic recovery. A whole generation of Liberians had their education sidelined. Most of those with the money and skills to rebuild the country fled abroad. While some have returned, many have not. Sirleaf's government is balancing many competing priorities as it puts the pieces of Liberia back together.
We have come a long way since 2006 when this administration and this government started, because what we met was truly, dysfunctional institution, collapsed economy, lack of creditworthiness, bad reputation for the country, a failed state, a pariah state, as we were all characterized. Today, I think we can say that Liberia is functioning again.
Using connections from her years working at the World Bank, Citigroup, and the United Nations, President Sirleaf has attracted more than $16 billion in foreign investments for Liberia, including new measures of social responsibility for investing companies. She also led a successful campaign to eliminate the country's $4.9 billion debt.
And I have said, and I truly, honestly believe this, if Liberia continues on the path on which it is right now, and we have good, acceptable elections, given our relatively small population and our ample natural resource, Liberia will not need foreign assistance in 10 years.
Sirleaf's optimism is shared by average Liberians, several of whom recently rallied in support of a peace accord between Nimba and Grand Gita counties, a source of historical conflict.
I see a very bright future for Liberia. I see a challenging youth. I see this generation doing far much better than the predecessor, I must admit. 25 to 30 years ago, you couldn't find young Liberians undertaking projects like constructing a home for themselves.
Despite these optimistic predictions, myriad challenges face Liberia's citizens. Liberia is still among the poorest countries in the world. 85% of its people live on less than $1 a day, according to the World Bank. A culture of gender-based violence has become entrenched in society, a lingering legacy of rape as a tool of war. And widespread corruption in government and throughout society continues to plague the country. It's a systemic problem that Sirleaf says she's trying to address in a comprehensive way.
You know, it's a societal problem. It's not a government problem. It's systemic. It comes from the many years of deprivation when people did not have a living wage, when people were told they could just survive on their wits, and that's exactly what they did. To survive, it was through extortion, dishonesty, indiscipline. It became, and still is, a cultural problem.
Instability in neighboring countries also threatens to undermine Liberia's progress. A disputed presidential election in neighboring Côte d'Ivoire has already sent tens of thousands of refugees over the border into Liberia this year. That's drawing UN peacekeepers' attention and aid away from some of the current projects in the rest of the country. West African leaders are aware the standoff in Côte d'Ivoire could severely impact the entire region.
If you look at the history of the Civil War, you saw the very clear links between Guinea and Liberia, Sierra Leone and Liberia, and so on and so forth. You saw many of the warlords and the weapons coming in over the border of Côte d'Ivoire. So there's no doubt in my mind that the region of West Africa is very, very closely linked in order to sustain peace. And that's why the elections in Guinea and the elections in Côte d'Ivoire is really, really important, also for the future stability of Liberia.
The UN still maintains a force of 8,000 peacekeepers and 1,300 police stationed in Liberia. That force, however, will be drawn down significantly provided the elections are peaceful. Liberia will continue to receive capacity-building assistance under the UN's Peacebuilding Commission. The 5-year-old program focuses on building a country's capacity to deliver basic services and maintain security. Its effectiveness will be put to the test in Liberia. Regional justice centers will be built and staffed, providing greater access to the courts throughout Liberia. Police will continue to be trained to maintain stability, and work will be done to reconcile the historic rifts that have caused conflict in Liberia, from land disputes to tensions between indigenous Liberians and the ancestors of freed American slaves who founded the Republic.
Whether the Liberians want peace or they want to go back to war, I'm not able to say, of course, but when we are discussing the elections in 2011, that is really the moment for the Liberians to show whether they want to continue on the path of peace. And that is why it's so important that if they want peace and they want to sustain the peace, they have to ensure that the elections in 2011 are free, fair, and conflict-free.